Let me just give you guys a quote here and see if maybe you can place who said this.
George Bush.
Some Christians don't jump ahead.
Sorry.
Some Christians haven't even attempted to think about whether or not they would die for Jesus because, you know why? Because they haven't really been living for him.
Yeah, I really saw that one coming. Was it Billy Graham?
Wow. Jerry Falwell.
Billy Graham.
DC Talk.
Oh.
yeah.
They quoted themselves. They gave themselves a page spread. Hello and welcome.
Sorry, I literally stood up to turn my I have this like fan humming in the background that's comes from my hot water heater, so I was like stood up to turn that off, and I guess more than 1 second went by since the timer started where you felt the need to jump in
I
there.
looked up and all I could see was your denim-clad ding-dong.
Oh, anyway, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Growing Up Christian. I'm Sam.
I'm Casey.
I'm Jeremiah.
And, well, it's the new year. Jeremiah, what was your New Year's resolution real quick?
I don't make New Year's resolutions.
What a good...
It was to buy fewer cars.
Yeah, buy...
Well, okay, so in 2022, I bought 0 cars. 0.
So you're making up for lost time now.
Yeah, maybe. So I bought one this week, and then I've got my eye on another that just popped up today that I've been offered to go buy it tomorrow.
There you go. So
I
just
feel like
knock them all out in January.
You're not the car guy, though, that like eventually his yard turns into like a scrap dealer.
Oh, no, I keep them revolving. Like, I think we counted it up. I've lost track, but I think we've had like 17, 18 cars. And the average is like 2 to 3 years. There's some we've had for 5 or 6, a couple that we've only had for a few months because there was something wrong or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we buy them to drive them. We don't buy any of them just to have them.
Yeah. Do you plan, like you had mentioned that this one that you just got was like a long-term dream car. Do you intend, is this one of those ones that you hold on to like for decades?
Probably not. I just don't think I'm the type of person that does that, but
yeah.
This is my dream car that I just got. So I'm sure I'll keep it for a few years. And then by that point, I'll have enjoyed it and had fun with it. And then I'll probably sell it just so I can try the next thing.
Gotcha. You're not going to let it,
I'm
you're just going to cover it
right into the grave.
Nope. I just don't think that's me.
Do you cover your cars with that one of those car tarps every night?
No, I had a convertible I used to keep outside that I covered because it had some tears in the top, but this one's going to be in the garage most of the time, like when it's not being driven. So that's something I did over the new year was I worked on cleaning out the garage to get room for it. I had lots of stuff that needed to be like go to the dump, get recycled. Cool things that listeners of this podcast definitely want to hear about.
I think that's all my garage is just like it's piled to the ceiling with shit, and I just need to get a dumpster at this point.
It's like an intermediate movement point between like your bedroom and Salvation Army.
Yes, it's a staging location.
I had some stuff that like a generator and an air compressor and things that I like kind of inherited from my grandfather after he passed. He had a 3-car garage of tools and things. And so all the grandkids went and took like anything that they wanted,
just ransacked grandpa's home.
Basically, but that's what they would have wanted. Like my grandmother, she's still alive, and she was super excited. Like anytime you looked at anything in the house, she was like, "Do you want it? Do you want to keep it? Do you want that to be yours?" So fortunately, like my family was really cool about everything. Nobody fought about anything or anything like that. I've heard like nightmares of people doing that with their parents or grandparents things. And fortunately, my family has had none of that. It was all just people picking up stuff they're interested in. So I brought back this air compressor and this generator and a couple like his chainsaw, a few weed eaters, things like that. And I've just never used the air compressor or the generator. And I've had them for like 5 years. So I decided I was tired of them taking up room in the garage. So I just try to list everything for like so cheap that no one's going to fight with me about it
immediately.
And that's what I did. I sold everything but a couple small things that I could just throw away that afternoon. So that was pretty sweet.
There you go. Cleaning house. All right. I have a question for you guys. And I meant to bring it up around Christmas time while we were gearing up for all the Christmas festivities, and it was more topical. I feel like once Christmas happened, like you can talk about Christmas shit for like, 4 weeks prior to Christmas, and then like 2 days after Christmas, everyone's like, we don't talk about this anymore. Not
Yeah,
till
people
next
do
year.
move on really fast.
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
dead.
but I recall the memory from when I was young of a family that instead of putting up a Christmas tree would because that had pagan origins, they didn't do the Christmas tree. Allegedly had pagan origins. I think it really did, right? That's like a true
I'll
thing, the
look it
pagan
up.
origins of a Christmas tree.
Yeah, it's
Well,
like some sort of Norwegian demon totem or something.
cool. Well, they, instead of doing that, they would set up a nativity set in their living room. Like a fairly large nativity set, like maybe one of the ones you would normally put outdoors at a church, and
Just
they
had
would
those.
open their presents around the nativity.
So they just had those weird, faintly glowing, thick plastic figurines in their living room.
Yeah, I don't know if they're light up ones, but it was. I just found that to be so. Looks like you got some information for us.
I do. Sorry, that was the smile of learning. So it does look like modern Christmas trees, in the way we think of them, originated in the Renaissance, in early day Germany. So it looks like in the 1500s or so, but they seem to be inspired by older pagan like worshiping of trees and things. So not explicitly like Christmas festival with a tree, but people decorating trees and standing them up in Nordic countries for worship or celebration or whatever, and then
Like
tying that to a
reemerged.
Christmas celebration was officially done, it looks like, by Christians in the 16th century. So a little bit A,
Does
a
it
little
say
bit of
anything about
B.
ornaments? Were they just like keepsakes or things that meant something to people at the time? Was it like just
So tree worship was common amongst pagan Europeans and survived their conversion to Christianity in the Scandinavian customs of decorating the house and barn with evergreens at the new year to scare away the devil, and setting up a tree for birds during Christmas time. So during the Roman
that was when you
festival of
kept birds in your
Saturnalia,
house? Yeah,
yeah. During the Roman festival of Saturnalia, houses were decorated with evergreen plants. So I think everyone's probably heard of Saturnalia as being a possible predecessor to our Christmas celebrations. And
Oh,
then
sure.
no, I figure like it's a common thing, is it not?
I'm
Maybe
not familiar
so.
with it.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
ignorant.
that's
So.
Related to Saturn.
Saturnalia is considered to be by some people to be like the Roman precursor to our common Christian Christmas celebrations.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so it looks
Well,
like decorations of evergreen boughs or evergreen trees around your house for your winter festival is a thing, but official Christmas trees got their start with the church in the 16th century.
I feel
interesting.
like the original thinking behind decorating the tree, because they used to just like put candles made of rotten tallow like on the branches, and it must have been something along the lines of like, if you went to sleep and you woke up the next morning and you weren't scalded to
Your
to a
house
crisp,
didn't burn
then
down
God's
completely.
gonna bless you this year. It's like giving God the chance to get rid of you rather than torment you for another year.
Yeah,
That
it's
is
like
an interesting perspective.
it's like a high
like
stakes, high reward casting of fleeces. I get it.
Yeah, it was like in Mario when you used to like run and double jump into the little area with the 3 tubes at the beginning of the first level, and then it would take you to level 9 or whatever.
Yeah, and
Fish.
it's like that. How?
It's like he's skipping ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I've lost the thread. I'm just riding this one out.
Yeah.
Yeah, God's doing a speed run.
But did you guys ever know people who did nativity sets instead of Christmas trees in their
I've
No.
never heard of that.
No,
Okay.
because from what everybody I knew, like if they were mad about war on Christmas stuff, it was always about the commercialization of Christmas, or like, the calling it the holidays, Christmas songs that weren't Christian, that
I
type
don't
of
know
thing.
if it was
Like,
the commercial. I feel like, well, maybe commercialization. I feel like they were very hung up on the language of as long as you, it doesn't matter how capitalistic and how many people got trampled at 3 a.m. at a Walmart parking lot, as long as they didn't say happy holidays, they didn't deserve to be trampled.
well, to be fair, what I'm thinking of is more of the people that like were upset, and I think there is an argument to be made of it's been a very commercialized holiday where like it's a whole month of celebrations, kind of, but they've gotten more watered down to where it's just celebration of being together with people and snow and Christmas trees and whatever. Like it does seem like it has been watered down to more of like, it lasts for a much longer period of time. There's like the Christmas season or the holiday season. But then really what you're celebrating is just lots of sales at different stores. So like,
Yeah.
I guess I get that to a degree. It does feel like Christmas Day is almost like the relief at the end of
Yeah.
a month-long
You've
buildup.
been
And
edging for 4 weeks, and now you can finally bust.
and I wonder what it was like maybe back in the, I'm sure, old movies and things don't accurately depict like the 30s, 40s, and 50s and stuff. But I wonder, was it a lot different back then? Because the way like my parents and grandparents and stuff describe it, it sounds like Christmas was different back then.
It was just, dude, back when you were skipping down a cobblestone walkway, that's when Christmas was really Christmas. We need to make Christmas great again like that. This family also only did, they only did 3 gifts each because Jesus only got 3 gifts. And that's why you do gifts on
These
Christmas.
people sound like idiots. They seem so annoying. They probably told literally everyone who would talk to them about it too.
Yeah. There's no way. I mean, I heard it from the kids, and it was more like you could see like the look in their face, like, yeah, we know.
That probably
You don't
was
have to
what it
make
is.
fun of
Anyone-
us for this. We understand. We didn't make this choice. This wasn't a democratic process in the family.
I bet we did know more people who didn't have Christmas trees, but like you just wouldn't say anything about that. Like you wouldn't advertise that, like, I didn't put out a harvest horde for Thanksgiving. Like I didn't put an Easter bunny. Like who would care about that? But somehow Christmas is the one where I guess it's just expected that you're going to put up a Christmas tree.
Yeah, that is
I don't know.
a heavy expectation.
You know what I haven't seen yet, and it's got to exist, but I haven't seen it yet. Is inflatable nativity set.
Oh,
They're
that's
like the
100% a thing.
Yeah,
truly white trash people in town, the ones that have the paint chipping off the side of their house and like one window that's like saran wrapped, like they go for the inflatable nativity set.
yeah.
I am Googling that right now. I guarantee that's a thing.
It has
100%.
to be.
Yep. I thought
Yeah.
I'd seen that in people's houses before. Wow. You can get that for $90 on Amazon.
We there's this house a town or two over from me that for the last 30 years have been like, they deck out their entire property with lights and inflatables and let everyone come. Like cops have to come and do like detail road work in order to like manage traffic and stuff. Like this is the last year doing it. So like I said, I mean, they're just older now. He's been doing it for so long. It takes him months to set up for it. It takes him a lot of time to like tear it down. It's like a whole year thing for him, and he does it because he loves it. And he has different sections in his yard of inflatables. So it's like different themes. You might have your Nightmare Before Christmas, and then your Snowman, and then your The Grinch. And then it's like
and it's all inflatables?
All inflatables. And you just kind of walk through it and bring your kids. And
I can't support that.
It's I don't like inflatables. It came up this year that we should get some, and it wasn't my choice. My kids are the ones that want to. I think that's how it starts. Kids are like, we're kids, so we like things that aren't good, and we don't have any taste, and we're basically just can you be anything but tacky when you're 5 and 7 years old? And
Sam's really understands the spirit of the season here.
Look,
oh
kids,
yeah, I am like
listen,
I have been.
Daddy can't put an inflatable in the yard. The minute you put an inflatable decoration in the yard, your FICO score drops.
It just devalues your home. It brings down the value of the entire neighborhood, and you're at risk of being murdered by your neighbors.
Dude, there's one section of Wichita that's like it's like a couple of blocks of just beautiful old houses. They're really nice. Everybody talks about going there in Christmas time to see the decorations, because some of them have like, the neighborhoods have like gables, over each side of the street and all this stuff. And it's really
all gather together and hire the local landscaping company to do all the lighting for them.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
That's the smart thing to do, I guess.
Yeah.
But we went down there and driving around and stuff, and a lot of them are really good, and some of them are like, they did their best on it. And then you pull up to the one house that's just like 50 inflatables.
Yeah.
You're just like, God, I just want to throw a Molotov into the middle of it.
It's like you're trying to win a competition by taking the shortcut, is what it feels like when you do all inflatables.
Yeah. And it's like, I could see somebody being like, hey, not everybody has tons of money to spend on Christmas decorations, so that's kind of crappy of you to say. But it definitely costs more to buy 60 inflatables for your yard than just to buy some lights and put them up.
It's like if you were in a cooking competition and you decided to take an artistic take on shepherd's pie. People would be like, it's still shepherd's pie.
Dinty Moore.
Yeah.
But it's in a bread bowl. It's like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
I was changing the subject. Or final
Go
thoughts
for
on
it.
inflatables?
We don't have to talk about Christmas anymore. Christmas is over. I was
closing the books on it until August 1st.
No one bring it up again at all. If anyone brings it up again between now and when does Q4 start? God damn, Q4. Fuck. I'm so happy to be out of retail. Okay, no, before we close, book back open. Before we move on, I've been relentlessly like made fun of for being a curmudgeon about Christmas. And I think it's just because I've been in retail or had been in retail for over 10 years. And it's like, from right now, everyone's already talking about buying for Q4 next year. And it's literally you never get out of that conversation. And if you look at business profits in the retail world, it's like you do 70% of your business in Q4. And it's like you basically just like stagnating and using some of your Q4 money to not go under for 7 months. And then you're like Q4. And then you just like trick everyone to buying shit at a discount rate instead of, I don't know. Like I feel like it made me go insane that like your entire year is to prep to actually be a viable business. And if you don't succeed in that time, you might not be able to continue existing.
Yeah, it's almost as if the American economy is a big house of cards built on credit and borrowed money and next year's sales and
built
profits.
On consumption that is always expanding, kind of like cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Christmas. I think any holidays, when you look at them from like a broad scope, they're all like commercialized. Like that's a big part of what separates them from any other day of the year and stuff. I feel like you just have to have your own things that you do. Like it's your own things that make you like Christmas or Easter or whatever it is, you know? And I feel like that's why it's important.
I'm a big fan of not meeting people's expectations, though. That's made me feel good over my adult life.
Mostly your wife's.
Yeah.
No, his parents are in there too.
Yeah, I mean, really, everyone that I care about or that cares about me, as I feel like it's just a cycle of life.
This doesn't sound like this is about holidays. No. This sounds like it's about something else.
It's possibly about.
We can talk about it if we need to, but like again,
you're like, oh, everyone wants to do this. Everyone wants to like. My thought is, just because I see you around Christmas time doesn't mean I owe you a present.
For sure. Like I'm from a really big family, and we got over doing presents for everybody years ago because like it's just impractical.
It is.
So we normally like I get my parents something, they get me something. My wife's family, they're a lot smaller, so everybody gets each other something, but there's only a few people, so it's no big deal. And then everyone else, like the present is just getting to see everybody, and like the present is the families travel in from different places so everyone can see each other around Christmas time, and that's good.
Yeah. I mean, having kids, it's changed a lot. And I think this was one of the better years. Like when kids are little, they don't have personalities and things that they've developed likings for. So like everyone who doesn't know what to get them just gets them like a bunch of bullshit. And you come back with a trunk full of stuff that you don't have any place for in a tiny house. And like, you're like, oh my, okay. So then you have to like spend a few months like reorganizing and doing all that. So this was the first year where it's like, oh my God, like people didn't really get me much. That was awesome. They focused on the kids, but with like actual, like real practical, good, meaningful gifts. So like, I don't know. I was like, I felt good this year. So I didn't ruin it for everybody with my bad attitude, which was nice. And that was my Christmas present to the family.
Yeah. That's
now
nice.
we can close the book on Christmas now. Sorry.
So I went and saw Avatar: The Way of Water last night.
God. And how is that almost 4 hours for real?
With previews, it for sure is.
Well, all right. So Casey, you said you went. Did you go with anyone else? Let's set the stage here.
Yes. So April and I went with another couple, Ryan and his wife, Ryan, who designed our t-shirts that we did.
Yeah.
Just
and what
maybe
led to
the nicest guy ever.
Okay. And what led you to decide or to invite everybody to go see Avatar? Like, is this just an idea everyone cooked up, having a crazy evening? Someone suggests you go see Avatar. Is this something you've been
Well,
looking forward to?
Did you
so
plan this for weeks?
last episode, I think I talked about one of my New Year's resolutions was to like get out and try to be people's friends. And so that was part of my plan was like,
Man, you and
oh,
Sam
we'll go
really
to a long
sound fun.
movie.
You guys talk.
I think I'm fun once you get me out,
Okay,
it's
okay.
just that I'm going to drag my feet on it a lot. But no, so we went to got some dinner and then went to Avatar and um it was a movie.
A
I'm not going to
feature-length
give
film.
away any spoilers or anything like that. Um, if you liked the first one, I would imagine you'd probably like the second one. It's impressive. Like just looking at it is impressive. I mean, it's phenomenal CGI. It's pretty incredible amount of detail that they put into world building and all of the animals and machinery and all that kind of stuff. That part of it, very cool. Story wise,
I mean, was it even different than the first one?
not a lot. It was different from the first one in that there was a lot less there.
Yeah.
You're not setting up like the whole like contrasting like this like native culture that's got a respect for their environment and that kind of like thrives in this natural setting and stuff with the you know people of Earth commercialized drill and mine and take it for all it's worth sort of viewpoint, which is heavy-handed for
Right.
sure.
Right.
I would say it's probably a little more heavy-handed in this one just because there's not as much new ground for them to cover here. The thing that I notice more and more nowadays, I guess I just think about it more, is like something that is really funny to me is like the conflicting morality of that's portrayed in movies.
Okay.
It's hilarious to me how like, well, first off, movies just continually set up like the same premise. Like
Yeah.
literally any movie that you go to has like an angsty teenager in it that's just not quite like everybody else. And there's always someone there that's like, oh, look at the freak.
Yeah.
Every movie, every TV show, that's the plot line. It doesn't matter if like they move to the country from the city, they're like, check out City Girl, what a freak. The opposite. It's like, oh, check out the country bumpkin, what a freak. And at some point the character goes, cries to their parents and they're like, why can't I be like everybody else? And yeah, and then you find out that they're super special and that's really great.
And
But
is that the story? Is that part of the
it could be.
Lady in the
It's
water or whatever
well,
the fuck?
it's a movie from the last 20 years. So yeah, it's part of it. And I don't know, or like so we've been listening to some stuff about like World War One recently, and it's interesting to like think about the conflict, like the difference in morality and values and stuff like that from that point in time versus now.
Because you
Like,
mean because we've lost everything that made us great.
right. But like maybe it's just martial values in general, but like you can kind of see that there's like there's a lot of emphasis put on like playing your part in the bigger machine and doing your duty and
Okay,
just
yeah.
like you're
Other
serving with your
commie
unit.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But now everything is about like this like screw you individualism of like I disobey every orders even if it makes no sense, because I have to do what I think is right. Even if it puts all these other people in danger, even if it's like totally illogical, like it's most important that you like follow your heart and you do what you think is right, and that's more important, and eventually everything else will sort itself out, but you
Because
just
we're
got to
all
do
actually good people, and if you follow your heart and trust your instincts, it'll only work out for the good.
right. And it's funny because that's a theme that comes up a lot in this movie, and it doesn't really lead to anything. Like, there's not really a resolution. It's just that, like, you know, a character continually just does what he thinks he should do and puts all the other people around him in danger and stuff like that in order to do it. And it never works out. It's almost always like a real problem, in the script. And that's like something
What,
you
it
see in
builds to
so
a big
many.
conflict at the end, and then there's a big fight, and then it all looks like some relationships are gonna die, but then they come back to each other, and then they win a battle, and everything is okay.
Right.
Okay. That was the plot of the first one, so I was just riffing off of what I remembered from that.
It's reminiscent.
Dude, and there, I love that this one came out 12 years after the first one. I mean, how far removed are we from the first one?
Yeah,
At
I think
least
it was like
12 or 13.
2009.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 14. I guess we're rolling up on 14 years.
Yeah,
And
2009. Yep.
and now they're planning like a third movie.
I think
I
third
think
and
there's like
fourth, right?
3.
God,
Yeah.
so why I guess that's what's strange is like why the long wait? I think the third one, so because they're like, they're getting really heavy-handed with their storytelling. At first you're like, there were some people, this is before the terms woke were used, but as a pejorative particularly, but the first one was like people related it to like Pocahontas and like, oh, this is just to make white people feel bad because, some people live in that mode of defense and being on guard is
Right. Like
thinking
telling
being,
a story about colonization on another planet must be an allegory for the
yeah.
bad things we've done here. How
And
dare
if-
you?
Exactly. How
if
dare
that's
you
your
make me
instinct.
think?
Yeah, and if your instinct is to go to that, it's like you're the one thinking about that.
So, yeah, it
way
sounds
too
like
much.
you already kind of inherently
Yeah.
know that this is a bad
Exactly.
thing. Let me guess, Casey. In the second one, is there like a really heavy-handed climate change analogy at any point?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There's Dude, it's funny how many like weird little things they throw into them to just like oh yeah, hey, we're gonna hit on this theme for 3 minutes.
Yeah,
Right.
but
You
people
know,
don't talk like that. Like it's just throwing things in to try to cover all your bases. I, so the third one, if I understand correctly, is going to be about how they send all the Navi to like these assimilation boarding schools, and then the fourth one's going to be like a few hundred years later they find like thousands of dead ones in the backyard of these boarding schools. Is that right?
I mean, I could see it going that way. Yeah, we're not blazing new trails here.
So I think the answer why it took so long, though, is it's James Cameron. He does whatever he wants, whenever he wants, on his own schedule.
That's very true.
And he's been working on different technology and filming things and excuses for him to get in submarines and go explore the ocean because that's really what he likes doing. And like he's at that point of his career where he's like, so I'll take 10 years because I want to make it perfect for him. Like he really is just Michael Bay, who's actually a little more talented. Like that's James Cameron.
You just gave me a lot more respect for James Cameron because I didn't think of it like that. He's milking the fuck out of this. He's like, oh no, I'm going to do whatever I want and you're going to pay for it. And
Right.
then you're going to give me the biggest budget anyone's ever seen for a movie. And guess what? I know it's bad. You know it's bad. And it's going to do great. And no one gives a fuck. Everyone
Because it's not bad across the board, though. Like
Right.
visually, I'm guessing, Casey, it was incredibly impressive visually, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the technical
Turn the volume
aspects
off and just watch it.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm guessing the technical aspects of like probably the way he does his digital like CGI filming techniques and all that stuff is probably really, really good. Like he's probably boundary pushing again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just the story is normal, right? Or like average.
Well, I feel like we're at this place right now where like, I mean, I think it's less to do with like, oh, people just can't digest anything, and more to do with the fact that like Hollywood's like, if we lose money on one more movie, we are all gonna have to kill ourselves. So like they don't take chances on. And right,
We're gonna lock the doors of the studio.
But I don't know. I mean, and there's a place for all sorts of different kinds of movies, and some should just be fun, but there's just a lot of it that's not fun. Like it's gruesome and like I hate a really good story has a bad guy that you can understand and relate to some extent. Like, you know, if you're like, I like, I love Star Wars, and I've read a bunch of the books and stuff, and like Anakin Skywalker is not just like this evil man. Like, why is he doing that? Why is he killing these people? Why is he taking over this place? Well, he's evil, and evil guy do evil thing. You know, he's got like an arc that, like, if you follow it, you know, you can see how someone ends up in that mindset, and like they're relatable in some way. And like more and more movies nowadays, I feel like, and maybe I'm saying nowadays, but you're like, what is the motivation here?
Yeah,
they're
I
just
don't
an
think that's a
evil,
nowadays
hateful.
thing. I don't think that's a nowadays thing. I just finished rewatching all of the James Bond movies because I've never seen most of them. I've only ever really seen like the Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig ones. And first, those aren't good movies.
No,
The Daniel
No.
Craig movies I think are really good. The Pierce Brosnan ones, there's some fun to be had, but like most of the classic ones, they're bad. They're
yeah,
just bad movies. And the motivations of most of the bad guys does appear to be like, cause we're communists, like, or because I want a satellite that shoots a space laser. Like, what do you mean? Why? Like,
hence Austin Powers. That's what made like
Right.
Austin Powers doesn't age super well, I don't think. But like, Doctor Evil is evil for evil's sake. Like it's
well, I think
what they
something I
did with
realized.
that was pretty a good portrayal.
Oh, it
of-
was spot on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I watch a lot of older movies, that's the biggest thing that stands out to me is they spend way less time setting up characters that end up being iconic. Even going back to the original Star Wars movies, like I feel like movies these days put way more effort into setting up who a character is and what their motivations are and stuff. And they might do a bad job, like it might suck, but there's so many classic movies. I feel like when you rewatch them or you watch them for the first time, there's like this beloved character that you're really familiar with because of pop culture or something. And their introduction or something in the movie is like very underwhelming. Like they're just dropped in there and you don't really learn anything about them or their motivations. It's like the John Wayne thing. Like, who is John Wayne as a character in all of his movies? Like, he's John Wayne. Like, he shoots the bad guys and rides off with the girl, and like there is nothing to the character.
Yeah, it's like the
Right.
Disney villain kind of bad guy. Where
And
it's
to be
like,
fair, for Star Wars, Palpatine is basically everything that Darth Vader is, and Palpatine's just evil. Like,
Wrong.
no.
I don't have time to dissect that one, but
Oh no, I know a lot of his
very wrong.
backstory. I know a lot of his backstory, and I still feel that way. So maybe that would be a fun conversation sometime.
I think that should be a conversation. I want to
I
facilitate
don't
that
know.
debate.
I don't know. I feel like
I'm
after
gonna-
the last like 10 years, anyone who really wants to argue in depth about Star Wars things, I think that's my cue to like, I don't know if I need to be in this conversation. Like,
Maybe
It's
that should be our-
probably a good time to jump.
It should
Jump
be
ship.
our, that should be the first whenever we decide to get a Patreon going. That'll be the first Patreon episode because we know that the majority of consumers will be like, I don't need that. I'll skip that.
well, I mean, I'm fully prepared right now, like with no prep, to do about 3 or 4 hours on why the Fast and Furious franchise are legitimately some of the best movies ever.
Oh
So
God, you're one of
Dude,
these
this
people.
is where I dive off the cruise ship.
Maybe if we get a Patreon, we can all. I've never seen one of them, and I am not a car
You've
guy.
never seen
No.
one of the oh my gosh. We have to do a like watch and review thing. Oh my gosh.
I know that I don't care for most of the actors in it. Rest in peace, Paul Walker. The only movie I ever really enjoyed Paul Walker in, arguably he wasn't great, and he's never been great in anything he's done. But Running Scared was just like,
Okay, hold on. You don't get to say I've only liked him in one or two things, and I haven't seen the
No.
franchise that put him on the map and his
Yeah.
main acting
Well,
contribution to the world.
He was
that's a
great
big
in A
okay.
Knight's Tale.
A Knight's Tale. He was
that
on.
was a swing and a
Oh,
miss.
Okay. I saw him. There's definitely
Varsity
only a handful of
Blues.
movies. What's the one where he like just swims underwater without a shirt on the whole time?
Oh,
Well,
with Jessica Alba.
Yeah,
Really
that was a horny
crappy.
movie. I remember people
Deep
watching
Blue.
Deep Blue. Yeah, I
Blue
remember-
Crush. Blue Crush.
No, that was the Blue Crush was a surfer one.
That's
I
He
don't
was a
know.
surfer.
yeah. There was a bunch of
maybe it was.
weird surfer
Yeah, okay, but it wasn't
movies
Blue
around
Crush.
that time period.
But
Blue
yeah,
Crush
anyway.
was like it was more of a like female led story, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
that
was.
was- I think so.
I got to figure this out now.
I think it's but no, Deep Blue Sea. That's with Samuel L. Jackson, right?
Yeah, shark.
right. Yeah, that's
So,
definitely not it.
The Blue? Might just be The Blue.
I'm going to figure it out because now it's bothering me. One
Well,
second. I'm
okay,
going to his
so-
IMDb.
While you do that, I have I'm making judgments on Paul Walker. without having seen Fast and the Furious, but I've seen the commercials, and I think, that's
You have
enough.
no idea. You have no idea.
Yeah.
I think we see the extent of his acting capabilities.
Into the blue.
He's
Into
into
the
the blue. Okay. I mean,
I thought I watched
Vin
Fast and the
Diesel?
Furious, but halfway through realized it was G.I. Joe, and I just said, whatever.
Well, to be fair, the later Fast and Furious movies are pretty similar to G.I. Joe. When I say like I love the Fast and Furious franchise, up to Furious 7, that's where
They
like,
made 8, right?
they've made 9, and 10 is coming out, and it's going to be a
Fuck.
2-parter. And there was the spin-off Hobbs and Shaw.
Two-parter. Because they couldn't fit that much storytelling into one 2.5 hour popcorn sales
Sam,
device.
you've probably heard this as a joke before, but just in case you haven't, like, it is literally a franchise about people who start out stealing DVD VCR combo TVs in Southern California and end up going to space to save the world, and that's not a joke.
It's insane. It's a campy, like, people like it for the campiness of it then, right? I mean,
a little bit of it, but it did legitimately do a ton for car culture. And
I'm out. I'm already out. You lost me, dude. I'm sorry.
the family aspects that people like to make so much fun of now, before they jumped the shark with that, they did have a several movie run where the action was really cutting edge and like really great action, and the story, if you just turn your brain off and go with like the themes of, love and family and sacrifice and whatever, was really well done. And like they had a sweet spot they were in for a little bit where they were really good, and then they jumped the shark and just got bigger and stupider and bigger and stupider, and here we are.
It's just a movie version of the band Throwdown, right?
They're good movies.
So back to the theme of like evil and relatable villains and stuff like that. So this might be like way too big and wild of a question to even really hit on without some thought first, but so
I can't tell if you're about to ask a serious question or a total joke, and the anticipation's killing me.
No, it's a serious question.
You just never tell.
Okay, so we're like listening to this series about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right?
This is a hard pivot.
Yeah. Well, no, it's in there, right? Because I feel like a lot of the values that show up in movies are like paper thin, right? Like, and that's another thing that's ridiculous, because you'll get a speech like midway through about how, we don't kill. Killing people is wrong. We should never kill. And then 20 minutes later, we're just blasting people in the face. Like the same character screaming woo as they do it.
Like John Wick. I'm done with that. I left that life behind.
Okay, but his motivations are very believable.
I know.
Someone killed his dog.
When I watched that, I was like,
see it.
Motherfuckers deserve everything they just got.
Exactly. Like, you will not shame. You're not going to talk smack about John Wick here. We don't have the time tonight.
I watched the first one on the plane on my way to visit Casey, and
nice.
that was so I had missed the mark for it, but I was like, oh, this is the first time I sat down and watched a mindless action movie in at least 10 years, and I was like, it kind of like brought me back to why they're fun. Like I forgot why they're fun and how they can be fun. And John Wick pulled me back in. I started the second one. All of them are on HBO Max now, so I can actually watch them, because it turns out watching them on the Roku app sucks. Fuck you, Roku.
So anyway, back to what was it? Israel, Palestine.
Okay, so America, growing up in the age of like the war on terror, like you look at, they were constantly parading stories in front of us on the news and stuff like that of like jihadists doing some sort of extreme action, right? Cutting somebody's head off or bombing a civilian target, or you name it, whatever. I mean, there's a billion examples, enough examples. Like if you look at any tough time through history, you find examples of people doing those same things.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy for somebody sitting in the comfort of their armchair and stuff like that to look at those types of actions and say like, oh, it's disgusting. That's animalistic. Like, who would do that? You would never do that. I would never hurt women and children, or blah, 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 blah. But then like you start reading about some of these like deeper conflicts that have, you get to a point where like if you're a young Palestinian kid looking at, the Israeli occupation of Palestine, however you want to paint that, right? There's decades of oppression and atrocities and all of that kind of stuff like
Yeah.
that. At some point, like, is there kind of like the extremist value might be to like I'm not sacrificing my life for this cause. I'm sacrificing my values for this cause.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I'm willing to do something horrendous to try to help the greater cause that we're doing. Because like movies constantly set it up as like, if we do that to win, then we're just like them. And that just is not realistic. That's just not how things work on this planet or ever have.
yeah, it's definitely not that simple. I guess I think a good example of that would be like your Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right? Who was involved in the plot to kill Hitler. But you can find in his writings that he would have at points in his writings would have believed what he did was morally wrong, but he felt like there truly wasn't another option. Like he so and you can see the conflict in his writings there. And I think that's like a good example of that because people want to I think people want to make him out to be like this because he was a Christian and they're like he was a hero, he was a part of the plot to kill Hitler, but also at one point I believe he would have assigned to a more like Christian version of pacifism, in the way that like in the Jesus way of turning the other cheek and things like that. And he just got to a point where he like couldn't reconcile the implications of someone like Hitler. And I think Hitler's the go-to example for everything. Even if you are a pacifist or you believe in a non-violent ethic, people
Or
will
you're
be like,
Kanye West talking about people you admire.
Or that.
yeah,
Or that.
and then, yeah, it's like that's like the prime example. Excuse me, for a lot of things. And oh, you're a pacifist? Are you saying you wouldn't kill Hitler? And you're like, you're. The idea would be that it's not that simple because even Bonhoeffer thought, yeah, let's do this, and then it didn't work. And I mean, a failed assassination attempts on dictators usually makes things go even more poorly. Like it's like you better not miss kind of logic. And what is it? What's the saying? If you come for the king, you better not miss. I think is what it is. But it's, but I think people try to graft heroes into uh, their system of belief, right? Like nonviolent people will be like, "Well, look what Gandhi did," and then you're like, "Well, I'm a Christian, but also Bonhoeffer, I think he did the right thing." And it's like they kind of strip the meat away, and they strip everything meaningful away from it. They strip the inner conflict away from Bonhoeffer. They strip some of the moral failings of people like Gandhi, who are like they also did some weird shit. It's like not to diminish the great things that people do, but like
But like he's a little
they remove
pedophilish, you know?
they remove like the humanity and the human context, and they just try to pull people into their camp for the sake of winning of an argument. And I think that's where like arguments just and
Hate it.
conversations go south. It's like, do we want to be humans trying to grow and learn and find out the best way to handle really complex situations, or do we want to be dogmatic and stay in this camp forever and utterly waste everyone's time screaming into the void?
Well, I'm like, we're talking about extreme examples for sure with this. I mean, we're talking about murder, right? But to preview our one of our other talking points tonight. So like we've got a copy of Jesus Freaks by DC Talk here. And we all
Hey,
remember hearing stories from that book or just general like martyrdom stories in general. But okay, take killing people off the table.
yeah,
All right. What about the stories of people who were like hiding Jews during World War II? And when the Nazis came to the door, they were like, refused to lie to them. Whether those stories are true or not, that's the stories that we were told. And, like, it's really easy to look at that example as a person and be like, you weren't willing to sacrifice some sliver of morality to save all these other people. Like, you weren't willing to
Your
take
version
that.
of morality, like not even. It's
Right.
not like that's like there's a golden standard of morality where that's always where it's black and white. And then those are people who are just in a black and white mode of thinking. It's like you're sacrificing not just like true morality. You're unwilling to evaluate your understanding of something at the cost of human life, which is so fucked up.
Yeah, and it's like held up as like an admirable thing, and it just doesn't make any sense. Like, as an adult, having lived out here in the real world,
You've had to
how
kill
do
a few people. I mean, I get it.
right? You got to tell a few lies. Sometimes, you walk out of Walmart with a bag of dog food on the bottom of the cart. You don't necessarily scan it. For the greater good. Dog got to eat. But that's the kind of stuff, though, that there. It's silly to act like there's no value in like saying I will take this sin on myself to help these other people. And like the idea that they're trying to set up, I think, is like, well, God just wouldn't bless something that started with sin and impurity and stuff like that. Like, that's man trying to like control things on his own instead of trusting God, blah, 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 whatever, you know? But there's like so many examples down through history of it.
And
This
in
like
the Bible.
exact, right. Where, dude, the Old Testament, like we've been going through all these Old Testament stories, like thou shalt not kill did not apply to a whole lot of people. And it
Isn't
didn't
it
seem
technically
like
thou shalt not murder?
People have this debate, and it's truly
go
a
back and
debate on
forth
how
on
you
that.
could want
Yeah.
to interpret that. Um, I feel like bias has a heavy hand in that. But also it's also translation. I mean, maybe bias can influence a ambiguous translation into English from something that was written in the 4th century B or earlier than the 4th century BC. So I don't know. I just know that the worst people are the ones that are having that conversation very publicly all the time. Like your Mark Driscolls and your whatever. Like it's like it's never a person that you're like, yeah, this is a good one. Let's listen to this conversation. It's like you're trying to justify just being an asshole is essentially what you're trying to do. You're like, this is biblical. Don't tread on me values, and I'm out.
Well, I don't know like what the broader point is with this stuff other than just like that like morality in movies is so paper thin and it usually contradicts itself within 30 minutes. And it's just like kind of struck me as funny lately. Like I feel like I'm noticing that more and more. And in the case of like I don't know, like this new Avatar movie, like they go out of their way to set up this premise in advance when it's going to be broken like shortly thereafter. I mean, it doesn't make it 15 minutes and they're breaking this principle that they just set up. And I feel like that's what's not compelling about a lot of movies nowadays is that there just doesn't seem to be like a broader point or a narrative that they're trying to tell. It's literally just people continually like making rules to break them
I
over
mean,
and over and over again.
it really shows you that it's actually not modeled after the US at all because we've never broken our stated values. So I can see why people would take that position that it's ridiculous to think that way. So.
I think there are plenty of movies and TV shows doing what you like you're saying you want there, Casey, but it's just not the like super accessible big action movies and stuff just don't tend to do stuff like that. Like
Sure.
there's
I'm going
Succession.
to the slop bucket looking for a steak,
Yeah.
okay, you were just looking for some good entertainment but you also wanted to be challenged a little bit. You wanted to think a little, and you didn't get that from Avatar 2,
Or
The
he
Way of
didn't want to
Water.
think at all, and Avatar made him do that by going so far out of their way to try to not make you think that they circled back to making you just sit there and try to like patchwork the entire thing together to work.
Well, I think like Avatar's annoying in ways because it's a big budget blockbuster action movie that continually tries to like set up emotional despair with just little things that just don't make any sense or they're like gratuitous and kind of over the top, and I don't know, it's just I found it to be an annoying movie. It's worth seeing just so, because it's impressive looking and stuff, but like the story just not good. I recently rewatched, I think we talked about it on here and then it made me rewatch it, but I rewatched season 1 of True Detective.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's it's a perfect example of like doing those things correctly.
yeah,
It's so good. If you haven't seen it, you really should go back and watch it. Like it's gruesome at parts, and
and dark, very like thematically very dark.
but you see like what's great about it is that it has characters that are human and still like the main character Russ, that's like the kind of like outcast detective through the whole thing. Like he's this perfect example. He's contrasted with this guy who's his partner, Marty is the good old boy that goes to church, that constantly like professes virtue in all of these different ways and then breaks them in every way possible. Like he's the guy that
Yeah,
talks about family while he's having an affair with it, on his wife. And he talks about loving his kids, but then he's like abusive towards them and stuff like that. And like not intentionally, not because he's this evil guy, but because he's human and he just like does not know how to live his values at all. It's all like it's professed morality, and Rust on the other hand is like
kind of nihilistic.
nihilistic, but like has this like code that he follows, and like
Yeah, that's right.
it doesn't win him points, and nobody recognizes like those values in him, but it doesn't stop him from doing the right thing and pursuing those virtues over and over again. Dude, it's so good. I've seen it like 4 times now, and
Really,
I'll probably watch it again.
I've never rewatched a series in my life. Unless maybe that's not true. I've probably gone through like a season of. If I watched a season 1 and then thought my wife would love it, I'd be like, I'll rewatch season. I've probably done that, but for the sake of just rewatching something on my own, I've never done it. And True Detective will probably be the first one that I revisit, and I really should. I mean, I just remember watching every episode. I remember taking a break from it because it's just like it's so much and it's into and like to sit down and watch it. You're like what you're getting yourself into. And I was like, I'm just not ready to watch that tonight. And I would go like 5-6 days, like even though I could have watched it straight out. It probably took me almost a month to watch the whole season, which is what, less than 10 episodes probably.
8
I
episodes.
think it's
Yeah.
10. Yeah.
And I think it's truly like a real it's a real work of art.
Yeah.
Season
Absolutely.
3 is also very good. I don't think season 3 is quite up to season 1, but I mean, if season 1 is 100%, I think season 3 is like 85-90%. I mean, it's extremely good.
I'd agree with
I'd
that.
agree.
It
It's
was
season
very
2
good.
for everyone. Look, 20.
They tried some stuff. Okay,
Just don't watch it.
They did like a Valentine's Day thing where they're like, we got Colin Farrell, we got so and so, we got like this whole big star cast that we don't know how to, like, we didn't put them into any sort of actual like narrative.
Yeah, it was weird.
Man. So, speaking of weird morality tangents, I've been
Let's apply
reading
this to real
through.
life.
That's exactly real life is exactly what we're about to talk about. So, if you were a youth group kid in the in that like 90s and 2000s era, you probably remember this book called Jesus Freaks. It was put out by, I guess this was written by DC Talk.
There had to have been someone else involved.
It just
Maybe
says
not.
Jesus
That
Freaks.
sounds negative, but it just a band putting out a book of collective. It's like a collection of story. Well, you keep explaining it. You know better than I do.
DC Talk and the Voice of the Martyrs. Stories of those who stood for Jesus, the ultimate Jesus freaks. And I remember getting this as like a teenager for Christmas or something like that. And it's a lot of stories of like martyrdom and people, facing down death or despair, but holding firm to their faith. And it's an interesting book to revisit. I remember I didn't love this book when I was younger. I remember reading it and hearing some of those stories where it was like they just wouldn't lie. And so, like the Nazis found the people and they all died, and just really not getting it, and kind of talking to my
That story
pastor.
is in this book.
I don't know. I mean, I
Okay.
haven't found that this time around. I
Okay.
remember a couple of things along those lines that were in the book that like I went and talked to my pastor about. But it's it's dude, there's so many weird stories in here. And one thing that's interesting about this too is that all of these stories, there's a lot in this book. None of them have any like footnotes or references. Like there's nothing saying like, as told by or from the book of blah blah blah. It's just like a story. A lot of them about like nameless, faceless people from, the communists. Dude, I would love to do a word search on this video or on this book and find out how many times communists and communism is used in it.
Oh my God. I like that trend hasn't died out. In fact, I think it's had a bit of a resurgence, which has been kind of nice.
You would think that like the communists like ultimate goal was to destroy, like they did everything else. Like they toppled the czarist government to destroy Christianity.
Well, I was recently at well, I guess it doesn't matter. I was at my in-laws and Newsmax was on, and I found myself watching some of it, and it was like this talking head going off on communism, and it was like communism is always evil. Communism's intent is to destroy everything. Like it was just like these weird like it's just the same shit you've been hearing forever. And I find myself triggered by things like Fox News sometimes when I watch it, but as time goes on, you watch it and you just like you're less triggered and more just like dumbfounded. You kind of even smirk at it. You're like, I'm looking at an adult man on television just ripping all the buzzwords, every single one possible. They have little nicknames for all these different political groups who vote certain ways. And then like one of the things he was just he even ripped on some this is how Newsmax is like really just
legit
in their like really ideologues is like they ripped on Mitch McConnell because he teamed up with the evil, dangerous communist Democrats and sided with China. And then they pull up this poll and it's like 2/3 of Americans believe that Biden and the Democrats put China first and America second. And then you're like, where's the fucking source? I swear to fucking God, that was exactly what they said. Swear to God. And it put it up on the screen with a giant 2/3. And then it's like in the bottom, real small before it just like you see very quickly where it's from, but not enough time to really see it. And I wanted to be like, who conducted this poll? Because literally 2/3 of the country do not believe that. They probably asked like a misleading question that people answered, and they're like, this works the way we need it to. So here we go. 2/3 of Americans believe that. And it's still communism. They can't, and the Democrats are communist. And it's like, the irony that they can't of it is like, as someone who is generally a leftist in a lot of their thinking, like you look at it's just, you kind of look at them and they're just like, we get it. You're two sides of the same coin. Like it's all this, no one's helping. You're all in bed with different big businesses. You're just taking money from different people. And you think that the money you take makes you better than somebody else. And it's just listening to the same old talking points of communism. What do Democrats rip on when it comes to GOP? Do they have? Is there
fascism?
Just racism and
racism, fascism, the good stuff.
Which I mean, I probably think is there in a lot of their votes, but the end goal for most of these people is to hold on to their money and power, and they use the words and means necessary to appease their base in order to keep that. So,
to answer the question from earlier, it looks like that book was a collaboration between DC Talk and Voice of the Martyrs, which I imagine a lot of people have probably heard of Voice of the Martyrs.
Yes.
Is that like an organization?
Nonprofit. Yep. Their mission is to defend the human rights of persecuted Christians. Founded in 1967 by Richard Wurmbrand, a Lutheran priest, a Pentecostal Romanian of Jewish descent who spent 14 years in a communist prison for his faith in Christ in the Socialist Republic of Romania, which had a policy of state atheism.
I read his story not super long ago here. It's somewhere in the book here. Yeah, there's I think that's we've said it before talking about like conspiracy theories, but that's where the conspiracy veers off into like dum-dumville. Okay. When the motivation cannot be explained by, yeah, so and so wants to make more money and keep their power. Like that's the motivation. That's the motivation of every ugly, bad, corrupt thing that's going on in the world, is somebody trying to make more money or hold on to the money they have. That's it. So when you start like getting beyond that to where it's like, well, it's because the globalists believe in depopulation, and so because they're in league with Satan, and so they need to kill off 30% of the world's population because that's what they believe. Like
Exactly.
we are talking about nothing at this point.
Well, yeah,
Like,
I mean that obviously is dumb, but do you really think it's just money and power? Like I think there are real ideologues
Yeah, there are.
that are true believers in their causes of different types. It's not saying money never factors into it, but
I think it always factors into it. And I'm not saying you're not saying that, but maybe you wouldn't. I'm saying I think money always factors into that. I think money changes people. And I think that when you get to a position of political power and you rub shoulders with everybody everywhere, I mean, what the New York Times was it the New York Times that just like broke a story on corruption, like just the corruption of the Supreme Court and how they all have set up these little charities, and that people who are involved in cases that they're litigating on are donating to these quote unquote charities that they've all made, that they're all major participants in and benefit from financially. And what even like additionally, like you look at the Supreme Court and has like there's no code of ethics for the Supreme Court. There's no reason to ever recuse yourself from a case because they're like supposedly the arbiters of justice in a way that they're so independent and neutral that they could never actually litigate on a case because it's beneficial to them in some way. Or it's just like so like when you look at the Supreme Court, I would argue, yeah, there's ideologues involved in there, but I think if you strip the money away from that, people just don't graft themselves to ideology. Like their ideologies are going to come through because they're getting money from people who want them to make those ideologies the law of the land in some way.
I think it's hard to find ideologues right now. I feel like that's kind of like a part of the era that we're in right now. Is it's like
in politics, or like you're talking like
just period. Like okay, if you go back 100 years and you look at like the Bolshevik Revolution and stuff like that, like Lenin is a true ideologue. There was nothing about that was like him trying to just like seize money and assets from people so that he could like live a certain kind of lifestyle. Like he was a true believer in communism, and that was his goal, was to bring it about. Is like more like a religion almost than a system of government or anything like that. But right now, I mean, I don't know. I can't think of anyone that I would say is like a true ideologue that has any sort of like real power at all.
that has any sort of power. I think I feel similarly. I want Jeremiah to dissent just for the sake of conversation, and I feel like I don't know if you're going to.
no, I don't know. I think it would all come down to how you're going to define those things, an ideologue or a true believer or some significant amount of power. Like, I think if you're just talking politics, people who are true believers tend to get filtered out before they attain power on a national scale because they're not willing to play the game to get to the point where they can have real power. So they get filtered out.
Or you're willing to play, and if you are willing to play the game, you do it long enough where you literally just cast away your ability to be
Perhaps
a player based on your values.
Mike Liddell is an ideologue.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say. Um, Not that money doesn't factor into it, which it does, but then I think there's plenty of like big business leaders that are believers in the things that they do, but they're just out of the spotlight and don't really have power in that sense. So like they're kind of irrelevant to the conversation, but they have achieved some large layer of success that has nothing to do. Well,
Through their dollars to people who are not ideologues.
yeah, yeah, and then I mean, and then there's organizations. We'll use Voice of the Martyrs like an example. I think there's plenty of those ideologue type organizations. Do they want donations so they can stay up and running? Sure, but like if their only
Okay,
motivation
yeah.
was being successful, they're doing a really bad job at it because they're just bumming everyone out with
Yeah,
their stories of suffering.
I guess I don't.
Yeah, I guess, but I mean that's for sure. There's a lot of those, but that's also not like that's not somebody with power, I guess.
I guess what I'm saying is there's lots of true believers. There's
Yeah.
lots of people with power. The intersection between them, I think, is going to be hard to find because those values will like cancel each other out on the way up. It's a lot harder to become really famous and powerful than it used to be. Maybe that's along the lines of what you're saying is like, I feel like if you look at the histories of lots of famous people in the past, it was like, and then he got a job clerking for this judge over at this courtship, and then 2 years later he was in charge of this, and then 5 years after that he was the president of the United States. And like it seemed like when there were fewer people and there was a lot less mind share going around, maybe it was the people who survived the litmus test of like being remembered in history, right? So you're eliminating huge swaths of people that probably had very interesting lives and they just never got written down anywhere.
Mhm.
But yeah, it did seem like it was easier to like quickly ascend and it was less of a dogfight. And so maybe it was easier to get an ideologue up at the upper levels of power or something. I don't know.
Yeah, to your point, I think what you're saying about them canceling each other out on the way up is what I'm thinking of as ways that just it, when you're as, as soon as you are okay, a good example, right? When you had like Republicans essentially voting against what was
Kevin McCarthy, you talked about the
the
Speaker of the House.
I'm talking about the health for the veterans and burn pit victims and stuff like that. Like, by and large, Republicans voted against that on principle because they were like on the principle of they were angry at Democrats for not passing something that they wanted, and they were like, "Fuck you guys," and they're willing to let all these veterans who are suffering affliction from being around toxic burn pits in Iraq, even though they're if you want to if they ideologically they're the party that totes that they care about the veterans and they care about the military, and they paint the Democrats as people who hate the military and don't care about those who are fighting for freedom. And then when it comes down to a vote to protect the people they say they care about, I mean, almost unanimously, they just like shut it down. And I shouldn't say almost unanimously, but by a very large majority. You have a small few that will stick to their guns and vote their conscience, but that's not the majority. And are so even though, yeah, you might be able to argue that those exist, that maybe the few that voted their conscience, those exist. Maybe they are ideologues, but our system is set up to favor people who aren't, and therefore you're just not going to.
Well, even like the two like think of the two like boogeymen of each side, like look at like Marjorie Taylor Greene
Yeah,
and AOC.
there you go.
Like
Yeah,
AOC completely like turned her back on like the labor unions and stuff like that this year.
yeah,
And then chimed in at the very last minute to like try to get her name under the header there and stuff like that. Like she did not go out and advocate for those, but the right would have you believe that like she's this leftist ideologue Marxist that wants to like overturn the Constitution and institute like, carbon credit systems for your kids' sack lunch. But then on the other side, like the left makes like Marjorie Taylor Greene out to be like this horrible ideologue that, is whatever, all the claims, right? But like she took like 200 grand worth of PPP loans, you know. She'll be out there talking about like government spending and deficits and all of that kind of stuff. And then meanwhile, she just like scalped 200 grand out of the government during the whole like
I don't think
COVID
most of
PPP
people's
loans thing.
issues with Marjorie Taylor Greene are about her ideology around like fiscal responsibility. I think it's more around like the racism and the
But nobody's
threatening to
like,
shoot elected officials and that type of stuff.
but that's the thing is like there aren't like these extremist purist candidates that like change history
Except
in these
Bernie.
people.
Except
You know what?
Bernie
That's who we're missing from
and
this
Ron
conversation.
Paul.
Bernie. Well, okay.
I just wanted to take the wind out of Sam Sales. He is a true believer in dissolving the Fed and going back to the gold standard.
Yeah.
Whatever else you want to say about him, he totally believes those are real things that he could do.
Yeah.
Hey, Lenin would not have stood by and let like the media cut him out of the debates, or
That's true.
endorsed Joe Biden after being screwed in the primaries. Like, he was a radical and an ideologue that would have like taken to the streets and gotten it done at all costs. You know,
Even
that's what we don't have now.
Is a
Right.
Lenin?
We will
yeah.
eventually.
Wait, I don't like the direction Casey's going here. We will eventually have someone who takes matters into their own hands.
Dial up the suffering enough.
Okay.
Right?
Uh-huh.
You get enough turmoil on this at the street level, and one of those will pop up. That's like the recurring theme of history is that things get bad enough on the ground, a real one will spring up, and you won't have to paint them as some sort of like devoted ideologue. Like, they will be that.
Fetterman type.
So anywho, who wants to hear about dead kids?
Yeah. I wasn't sure how to steer back to this, but I was curious. So if you've been reading some of the stories, are there any that stand out to you as like, I'm sure there are plenty of real stories that are heartbreaking or horrible in there, right? Or elements of them are true, but are there any that stand out as being like particularly notable for being crazy?
Okay, so yes, there are lots of pretty gruesome stories in here that so one of the things that's tough about this is that like you kind of have to like go see if you can verify the story elsewhere if you read it in here. And some of them, like there was one about North Korean Christians that, they like hung their kids and then ran over them with a steamroller in front of a lot of people. And like, I didn't get to research it a lot, but it seems to be true.
North Korean Christians did this to their kids?
No, the evil, disgusting communists in North Korea did that to good, faithful Christians.
Okay. Sorry.
And that does seem to be what happened.
Yeah, I believe it. If you start anything off with in North Korea and it's going to be dark, it's
or like in Russia in the 60s and 70s or something. You're like, yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah,
a lot of these are in Russia.
Yeah,
there's tons of them in Russia. Okay, so this one's called "Take the Oath," and it's Valia Vishenko, who was a 12-year-old girl.
This is a Kill Switch song.
Yeah, USSR, 1960s. It says, every eye in the room was upon Valia as the director of the school called her name again. Valia Vishenko, the director said firmly, take the oath. Valia's mouth stayed shut tight. Valia, say the oath, he commanded. Valia, very well, I will read it in your name. Weeks earlier, the director of the school had decided that it was time that Valia, a 12-year-old Christian girl in Russia, should become a member of the communist children's group known as Pioneers.
This is big Valia. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego vibes right now.
Valia refused, but refusal was not hers to make. By law, the director took the place of her parents. When membership day came, the girls stood in a group before a table on which were laid the three-pointed red pioneer scarves. One by one, the other girls had stepped forward to take the oath and put on a scarf, all but Valia. As the director prepared to read the oath for Valia, he pointed to two other girls. You will place the scarf on Valia's neck as I read. He began, I, a young pioneer of the USSR, before my comrades, patriots deciding the question of my admission into the organization, promise that I shall stand firmly for the cause of Lenin and for the victory of communism. I promise, ... But his next words were drowned out as Valia burst out in prayer to God and began to sing a hymn. We will stand firm for the gospel faith, for Christ, following his example, forward all, forward after him.
That sounds like how a 12-year-old talks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we keep going any further, maybe a little bit later. I don't know if anyone will have much to contribute to this, but there's a point in one of Paul's letters, Saint Paul to be exact, in case some people are not on a first name basis with Paul here. And he talks about using his nationality when it serves him, and then using his faith in Jesus when it suits him. And you see times in which he uses his Roman citizenship to his advantage. And I think that's a just interesting thing to think about in light of probably a lot of these stories where it's like what benefit is it to you to not lean into your nationality or citizenship for the sake of what you say would be, because we have plenty of Christian stories of like of being subversive and playing the part. Like you get, it's basically like trying to have all the sexiness of James Bond and double agency, but under the banner of Christianity. You're like, well, we coast through as a citizen, but then on the side we lead these Bible studies, and it's like there's so many stories like that where they're probably participating in the day-to-day aspects of being a citizen wherever they are, and then doing their underground Bible studies in churches and things like that. And I think that's what's those in what Paul says specifically about his Roman citizenship juxtaposed to stories like this. It just doesn't even feel like you can make a good case for being this what's the word? I don't know.
Dogmatic.
Dogmatic, I guess, is a good one about something like this.
So many of these stories are told from like this completely post-Cold War American perspective of like, you can't be a communist and a Christian.
Sure,
like
yeah.
is like the overwhelming point in a lot of these stories is like they refused to say that they were communists, and that was the same as like echoing their faith, blah blah blah. And like this one in particular, there's no anything here about what happened to her afterwards or anything like that. Like that's where the story ends, as she sings a hymn. And then there's like a footer underneath the story that says, again and again in Russian schools, Christian children would stand up in class to pray out loud and to witness. These children were beaten and forced to leave their families, but others followed their example. In 1963, prayer was banned in American public schools.
Oh my God.
What? Did you see it coming?
Yeah.
April was reading this to me in the car, and the minute she hit that paragraph, I'm just like, oh my God. What would have happened if American parents had taught their children not to submit to this decision? They would have not been beaten, and their parents would have not ended up in jail as in Russia. Here in the United States, the First Amendment of our Constitution guarantees us freedom of speech and freedom of religion. What have we done with that freedom? Must we wait until it is taken away as it was in communist Russia or other dictatorial societies before we grow bold enough to stand up and proclaim Jesus before others?
You know what? This actually, depending on the circle you live in, ages quite well.
Yeah.
The message hasn't changed one bit.
It's hilarious to make like, God, it's so frequent that where people, especially like people on the right, make these comparisons to like their minor inconveniences here as if it was communist. Where you know how many people the communist government in Russia killed
that
just
weren't
for
Christian,
like being inconvenient,
just
for like living in the wrong place and eating food.
Right? Did they kill some people just because they were Christians? I mean, maybe. And like, not to invalidate the suffering of those people, but like the other 20 million, it was a lot of other reasons. Like,
I mean, you could probably write an entire book of people who were murdered for having mustard on their uniform.
But that's what a lot of like classical evangelism across the globe would have you think, right? Is that a lot of this stuff comes down to just it's good versus evil. All these countries or these governments hate God and hate Christianity, and that's why they persecute these people. And like, again, not to invalidate the suffering of good devout Christians across the globe, because obviously those things have happened, but like real history is way more complicated than that, and it's a lot more common that's like, no, you're just also a part of this other people group that terrible government, they were inconvenient, like Casey said, or like they wanted you to move somewhere else, or like whatever. It very rarely comes down to just, oh, they're a Christian. It's the same thing as people now saying like they're being kicked off social media for being right wing or conservative. It's like, no, 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 no. Say the whole story. Like, it's not because you were conservative. It's because
you just wrote the N-word 50 times and
right,
posted it.
right. It's like you might happen to be conservative, but there's more to this story. And again, that stinks because there are, I'm sure there are plenty of good devout Christians who have been persecuted to some degree in other countries, primarily because of their faith. Like that is a
Absolutely.
real thing. In the same
Definitely.
way,
Yeah.
like, and it's a good thing that Christians here in America would never persecute anyone for their faith, like
Right.
Muslims, or people who don't have faith or whatever. Like persecution,
Be the change you want to see in the world. They take that very seriously.
right? Persecution, and like I think it was what Casey said, or no, I guess Sam, you said it. Comparing a minor inconvenience or like someone disagreeing with you to persecution, I think is pretty insidious because it does invalidate like the real suffering of people across the globe.
That's a great point. That's what a lot of the stories, it sounds like, in this book will do. It's like, you can't. Now, I still think you can discuss the conversation around this gets weird depending on as your beliefs change, right? Because like people talk about this in relation to Christian persecution during the Roman Empire, or like during the the Pax Romana, the peaceful. It's like it's a negative peace, right? It's like, yeah, there was peace that was maintained through fear of being killed for falling out of line, but there was a unification, and it was like as long as you like paid your taxes and did the shit you were supposed to do, like there wasn't a lot of care about what God you worshipped. That did change, but that's because it didn't change because there was just a dislike towards differences of belief. It was, if we're going to maintain what we have, being subversive to that is going to cause problems. So like if you have people like trying to subvert the system, it's just going, it'll cause, you're like, oh, let's just squash that. That looks like a movement, and that's going to be a problem for us, because if that picks up speed, you're just going to squash this stuff ahead of time. So I think it's painted often as they hate your faith. Your faith is what bothers them about you. But it's really like, in a lot of historical context, I'm not really trying to justify, obviously I'm not trying to justify persecuting anybody under any circumstances, but I think they just kind of misconstrue it. And it's about what it could look like if a movement started. Historically, I think there are places now where it's just like, yeah, fuck that shit. We don't want, we want everyone to be the same. Like, even if you pay your taxes and do everything you're supposed to do and you're not being disruptive, if we find out this is what you're doing, we're still going to come after you for it. And you do see that. And there's plenty of stories of like this happening in China. China's, of course, known for not treating individualism well, I guess.
Yeah, but they're also terrible to Muslims and things too. Like
Exactly.
that doesn't
Worse.
excuse it.
Worse to
Yes.
Muslims.
Yeah, worse to Muslims. But
or like then you have the Uyghur genocide. Like they're bad to everyone. It's not exactly. So it's not because they're Christians. It's rarely because of that. If you are a Christian and you're being persecuted, you probably feel like it's for your faith. But I think what becomes strange, it's easy to be flippant for me about this, and because it's like, I guess I just honestly think they're so wrong about the level of commitment they need to have to their understanding and interpretation of the quote unquote gospel, that like they're willing to go through that, and just for the sake of like standing on a street corner and just singing a hymn and singing praises to God and acting like they did the right thing, and that their suffering for that is, yeah, it's tragic, but like, why can't we be that bold in our faith? It's like, no, don't. No one should be. That's dumb. Because that's not getting you into heaven. That's not getting you in. Doing the opposite. It's not getting anyone to hell. So when you stop believing in that, it feels like such a fucking waste. And I look at it as like it just feels like a fucking tragedy at that point. Like you were duped into like abandoning your family by having yourself martyred for a cause that is ultimately untrue, and
Like
that
the famous
feels
story
shitty
of
about it.
that guy a few years ago who kept wanting to go contact that uncontacted
That
tribe,
is exactly
and
it.
everybody told him not to do it, and he kept, like, he said it was God's mission for him and stuff. And like, I want to give a lot of Christian organizations credit. A lot of Christian organizations, it seemed like the ones he talked to still gave him the advice of like, this maybe isn't a good idea. Like his motivations didn't seem to be pure,
Yeah.
and it ended, of course, really badly for him. But like, I guess that dogged persistence of like, I'm going to do this in spite of nobody there wanting me and nobody here wanting me. Well, that must mean I'm on the right track. Like,
Yes.
because I'm
And
encountering more resistance. And like, maybe the answer is you're just being a jerk. Like,
yeah.
not to speak poorly of the guy
But
because he's dead, but it seemed like in life he was an inconsiderate jerk who, like, whether you can say he
for
brainwashed,
the gospel. Yeah.
was he an ideologue? Like maybe he was a true believer. Maybe he had an ego and he was
Quote
stubborn and
unquote
wouldn't
true,
listen to
true
anybody.
believer is a weird word too, right? Like what is
Yeah.
that? What does that mean? It's everyone thinks they are and nobody else is. And I think he's a great example because even when you look at everything, all the organizations that told every organization that were like, we're not going to co-sign this and we think you're kind of crazy, every single one of them, if I guarantee it, if you look at their system of their belief statements and their rhetoric, they line up with exactly what that kid did. And if
Mhm.
that kid did it and was successful, what if he did that and was successful? It would have made it into every one of their fucking pamphlets.
Maybe. It's possible. I don't know. Again, I think the real answer is it's more complicated than something pure of like he wanted to share the gospel and they told him not to. And like the real answers are a lot more complicated of like, yeah, but you could spread disease and they don't know you. And like a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with Christianity are really the real reasons. But the stated ones, his stated purposes never changed,
But
even though.
we have those stories through we have historical context to look at stories where people just airdropped into native lands and were like, here we go. And some of them died, some of them did. Was it Nate Saint? Is that the guy? And then like the person that killed the guy, that Nate Saint, his son and Nate Saint's son ended up being pals and they do mission stuff together now. Like,
Oh, yeah, one of those stories. Yeah.
right. You have those. And Christians love the shit out of them. They will just listen to them. They don't even need porn at that point. They just plug those into their ears and they just jerk off until. And so I get, that's what drives me nuts. Is I think do we know this kid's name, or we just keep calling him this
I
kid?
can try to look him up.
You're
But I
talking
think,
about the one that got killed on the beach.
yeah,
Yeah.
by a spear. He could have been in the movie End of the
Oof.
Spear. That End of the Spear 2 could have been about this kid if only he converted somebody. If only God showed up.
John Allen Chow.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I honestly, I think if it played out differently, logic says it wouldn't. And, but we have examples in history, a handful, where you go against logic and it works out and people go like, oh, wow, that's because the Lord pulled through for you. And it would have
There's a
gone
lot
that
of
way.
situations I mean, I knew people that that went into a remote tribe in Papua New Guinea and translated the Bible and stuff like that.
Yeah. And if you don't, I don't know. I think we're on the same page when it comes to like what he did and the reasons that people advised him not to do it were right. Like, yeah, you could spread disease. Yeah, this is a bad idea. And I think those organizations were right for doing that. But I'm saying if it went a different direction and things worked out the way he wanted them to, people would have co-signed it and been like, wow, look how good God is. And it would have showed up in books like this. And by them also not co-signing it, he could have been smarter about it. Not possibly. He could have been smarter about it. But I think that the language and the God shows up when you trust in him, like all the language around missions, Christian missions. I think the actions of some of these organizations when they try to be like logical about it, I think that they're actually going against their stated values in those cases.
Well, and it's also only the very notable stories that get recorded of these type of things. Like, I'm guessing Jesus Freaks, the book, doesn't have a story about like some guy that graduates from some Christian university and then wants to go on the mission field to Chicago, and he does that for a couple years and then slowly becomes disillusioned and then gets a job, like a white collar office job, and then slowly just moves on with his life. Like, that's
He
not
opens a
there's
pawn shop.
right. There's just not a whole lot to talk about with that. Like they've got to look for people that something crazy happened to them one way or the other, like crazy
Right.
success or crazy failure. And the crazy failure, I guess, is like a way to elevate the stakes. Like you need people to believe that the stakes are that high and that's something that could happen to them if you want them to be all in.
Well, and it's the same with anything. I mean, like, look at stories about people who started businesses. I mean, there's lots of stories out there of people who like bet it all on this idea and then it didn't work out, and
Yeah,
nobody's telling
tons.
stories about them. I mean, very few even get, reach that point of like, well, he swung for the fence and, it didn't work out, but you have to admire him for trying. Like,
You're right.
you hear about it when it works because it's more interesting to hear about. But let me just give you guys a quote here and see if maybe you can place who said this.
George Bush.
Some Christians don't jump ahead.
Sorry.
Some Christians haven't even attempted to think about whether or not they would die for Jesus because, you know why? Because they haven't really been living for him.
Yeah, I really saw that one coming. Was it Billy Graham?
Wow. Jerry Falwell.
Billy Graham.
DC Talk.
Oh.
yeah.
They quoted
Well-
themselves. They gave themselves a page spread.
That's amazing. Well, it's their book, so I guess
All
they
books
can.
are navel gazing
It's
to
DC Talk. Was that is that a lyric of theirs, or did all five of them work on that one sentence together?
I think
All
I
five
think
of
the
them.
three of
Three
them.
of them. Three of them.
Three
Sorry.
of them did.
Sam believes in the conspiracy theory about the two shadow DC Talk members.
Shadow
It's like
members
it's like
of
the
DC
fifth
Talk.
Beatle.
Oh my god, that's what we need to talk to Kevin Max.
It's
about.
Michael W. Smith and Stephen Curtis Chapman. Like we're just hiding there in the wings. The
I
real
would- dude,
power
if we
behind the
could get-
throne.
Kevin Max turned down he was on. When we talked to him, he was like, he gave us a thumbs up, and then a few months later, he's like, I'm not doing any podcasts. And sometimes people lie to you because they just don't want to do your podcast, and that's fine. It might not be the best fit for everybody. Even thinking about last week's episode, putting out the one with Brady Goodwin, and thinking about some of the conversations we had on the intro leading up to it, I could see somebody not wanting to advertise that. I think it went a little off the rails, and
Yeah.
that happens here. So sometimes people might just not want to do it if they look at our Instagram page or give this thing a little bit of a listen. But I truly haven't seen him do anything. So I think he was being honest about that.
Let's read a story that he likes.
If we got him on this and we just read him stories from this book and asked him how he felt about it now, how do you think that would go?
It would be really fun, actually. This one is about Maria and Varia. They're 18 years old in the USSR in the 1960s.
Maria and Varia?
And Varia. It's two women.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it was Maria and Varia, and then they accidentally used gender neutral pronouns.
That's what I was wondering the same thing. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
So
This hadn't been invented yet. This was the year 2000?
Yeah.
this is a great storyline intro for the next Avatar movie. They'll have some version of this. Okay, it says the two Russian teenagers had once been schoolmates in a communist boarding school. Varia, a member of the communist youth organization, had constantly teased and tormented Maria, a Christian. In response, Maria prayed for the young communist with special concern. One day, Varia said, "I cannot understand what a being you are, how so many insult and hurt you, and yet you love everyone." Maria said, "God has taught us to love everyone, not only friends, but also enemies." And Varia, as most teenagers would do, says, "Can you love me too?" Maria hugged her, and they both began to weep. Not long afterward, Varia received Jesus as her personal savior and witnessed openly to everyone about it.
And was no longer a communist.
Yeah, you're jumping ahead again. So, Maria wrote her parents, "We
Oh, that
went
wasn't the end of
together."
the story. I thought
That
this
felt
was
like
just like
the
a
end. That was a
one-page.
solid conclusion.
I was like, all right, maybe I've
Are
judged this
these
book harshly. That's a nice story.
are
That's
these
just
all
like giving it, getting ready for the story about these two young friends.
Oh,
are these all
okay.
one page?
Nah, they kind of run the gambit between like 1 and 3 or 4 pages.
So it's not necessarily designed to be read like a devotional.
No.
Because if you can't read 3 or 4 pages when you're looking at for a devotional, that just goes against devotional code.
Trying to keep your New Year's resolution, read one
Yeah.
every day. So this is where we sense a change for Maria here. It says Maria wrote her parents, "We went together to the assembly of the godless," which in parentheses it says the school's communist youth club meeting.
Oh my
It's like
god.
it's like Assemblies of God, but worse. It's like communist Awanas.
Yeah, exactly. I warned her to be reserved, but it was useless. I went with her to see what would happen. After the communist hymn, Various came forward before the whole assembly. Courageously and with much feeling, she witnessed to those gathered about Jesus, her Savior. She implored all to give up the way of sin and come to Christ. All became silent, and no one interrupted her. When she finished speaking, she sang with her splendid voice the whole Christian hymn. I am not ashamed to proclaim the Christ who died to defend his commandments and the power of his cross. Russian lyricism. I mean,
It's
not
almost as
not
good
great.
as it's almost as good as Hillsong, but just not quite there.
They don't. There's not like any Russian T Swift songs,
Yeah.
Afterwards, they took Varya away. We know nothing about her, but God is powerful to save her. Pray. Months passed after their single visit in prison. Then Maria received a letter from her friend who was in a Siberian labor camp. So basically, like, they went to the communist youth organization and she, like, interrupted it and talked about Jesus and sang a song. And so they put her in a Siberian labor camp.
Okay. And this is another story with just no references or anything like that.
There's a letter from her, and it says,
And we know for sure this is from her.
I mean, this one doesn't seem like a story that's that hard to believe. Like, I'm sure plenty of people got arrested for a variety of minor things and sent
But
to
why do
labor
we
camps.
have this information? I don't disagree that could have happened. I just think it feels so strange to have this many stories and to have a letter. But like, there's just no like who has this information? Where was it kept? Like,
I know.
why? How did it get to
that
us?
That is how a lot of these are, where you're like, where did this come from? It doesn't say. I mean,
that would be a fun question for Kevin Max. I'm gonna reach back out to him. We have to settle this once and for all.
Yeah, so the letter from her is basically just like, things suck here, but I keep praising God, and there's other people who are now praising God too.
And eventually every single person there did, and then they opened the doors and let everybody out. And there was a revival in Russia.
Exactly.
And the KGB came in and gunned every single one of them down.
Oh yeah, it's just story after story of that kind of stuff where it's like it's either something really horrific or it's something like it that seems so benign, and yeah, you just wonder like where did this come from and why do we have it?
Yeah, honestly, those aren't even really like, not to just diminish people standing up for, I don't know. You could argue that it's like good to stand up for your values, but then, sometimes you get a January 6th out of it and you're like, well, maybe don't stand up for those values in some way. But like some of these, like just the two you went through, you're like, it feels like if this is going to be a book about stories to motivate people to be more on fire for their faith, that they should be better stories.
Well, okay, here, maybe I should have started with this one.
Okay.
Because this is how the book starts, okay? She was 17 years old. He stood glaring at her, his weapon before her face. Do you believe in God?
Is this Columbine?
This is Columbine.
Yeah. It's the fake Columbine story. This scene could have happened in the Roman Colosseum. It could have happened in the Middle Ages, and it could have happened in any number of countries
they had guns
around
in the
world
Roman Colosseum?
today.
I didn't realize
But
there were guns.
instead,
Yeah.
it happens once to twice a month at a school in America for the 20-year.
No.
They actually did have AK-47s in Roman times, but people just preferred the net and trident.
That's a movie I would really love to watch, honestly.
Remember that video game that came out that was like that? It was like, it wasn't, maybe, I don't know, maybe like 6-8 years ago, but it was like you go back in time with an AK-47 and fight in the like Civil War.
No, I don't
No.
remember this at all.
I feel like it was called like The Darkest of Days or
All
The
right.
Dark Days or something.
I'm Googling. Keep
That
going.
I
sounds
never
like
played it. It didn't get good reviews, I don't think.
No, I can imagine why.
Yeah, so
Darkest
that's where
of
we
Days,
started.
Time travel to the American Civil War. I have never heard of this before. Wow.
What system? What did it come out on?
It was 09, so I guess like what,
Neo
PS3,
Geo.
Xbox 360.
Neo Geo.
Interesting. Sorry.
Yeah, so we'll have to like pull a few more stories from here at some point. We hit hard on the communists this time, so next time maybe we ought to try the Muslims out.
Yeah, why not? I mean, certainly the only persecution between Christians and Muslims has been a one-way street. So
There was one, I can't find it now, but there was one where it was like a little boy and he was like, I don't know, being tortured or something, and his parents like encouraged him to keep like singing the hymn or something. Like, it was just gruesome and ridiculous.
was and this boy grew up to be Ron DeSantis, right?
I think so, yeah. He was tortured by migrants.
Oh man.
So, Jesus Freaks, worth a pickup, guys. And I will say, I like the little stamp on the front, and it has roughly
stamp on the
pages,
front?
so it looks old.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
remember that was a whole style back in the day.
Can we get matching tattoos of that coin?
Yeah, this isn't a book. The roughly pages, I think, officially make it a tome. You know what I
How
mean?
many pages is it? It looks like it's got really thick paper.
Yeah, they might have fudged the length a little bit with the thick paper. Oh, dang, there's like a glossary in the back. You can sort by country.
Just in case you're trying to figure out what countries not to go to.
Communist ones.
Yeah. Which is that's everything, right? Except for America.
And European ones. Socialism.
Oh,
yeah. Well, I mean, not a bridge too far.
So it's like 375 pages, it looks like.
Okay, so they didn't cheap out. Like they wrote a solid book there.
100, at least 120 stories.
That's quite a few, yeah. There's a section at the end that says, "What can I do?" And then it has a couple of different suggestions. Like, it says you can pray, and it gives you some things to pray about. And like it says, like, create a bulletin board in your church or youth group area where you and your friends can post the answers to your prayers.
Oh,
say a short
cool.
prayer whenever you think of that country throughout the week. At the end of the week, ask God if he wants you to continue to pray for that country or to choose another one to pray for.
Yeah, you can't just add to it. You have to just pick a different one.
Yeah. I'm not feeling Pakistan this
your
week.
prayers are not working for this country. I think you're more suited for another. It's like a Christian vision board.
You can identify. Says hundreds of thousands of Christians risk their lives by gathering to worship Jesus every week. We in America may never know the extent of such repression. Hold a mock underground church.
To see that type of oppression, we'd have to have like a minor sickness where people were asked to stay home for maybe a week or two.
Dude, that's a survivor's guilt mentality right there.
Yeah.
Well, it's 100% what it is. It's the whole, like, this thing has happened to, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I heard the joke. And by the way, I'm not saying COVID is minor. I'm just making fun of those people.
Jeremiah's going to rant about the jab.
but like, that's 100% what it is. It's the whole, like, if these people, theoretically, these totally real people in this other totally real place had this happen to them exactly as we've portrayed it here, then what's your excuse? And like, that's kind of how all propaganda works. And it sucks because some of these stories are probably not propaganda. Again, I'm not trying to minimize the real suffering that has happened to people who are,
It's the way they're
very
framed
sincere
that
in
we're
their faith.
criticizing.
Right. It's the way they're fitting a bunch of stories into this specific mold, and some of them probably directly fit, and some of them probably have very little to do with it. And the story of a real person suffering is being co-opted to try to fire up American teenagers to be more annoying in their school for not having mandatory prayer anymore. Like,
Yeah.
that's the part. It feels kind of scummy because I think it minimizes the work of quote unquote like actual missions and actual missionaries and people who are really ride or die with like trying to fire up privileged youth group kids that admittedly do need like a little bit of a perspective on the rest of the world, but I don't know, just the suffering of Christian martyrs is maybe not a well-rounded enough understanding of like what other people go through.
You need a Reinhard Heydrich to rally around, you know?
I still think my hardest time with it is like, yeah, of course, not joking about the people who actually suffered. We have to, now that we've explained the joke and things aren't funny anymore, it's like
because we have no respect for you.
Yeah,
we don't think you can follow.
I think also where I just can't not joke on people is like this feeling that you have to do this because eternity's at stake. Like, if you're a Christian where you live and you want to do that however you want, cool. But like, you mentioned like it's not to minimize like the work maybe that other missionaries are doing or things like that. Like, I honestly think most missionaries need to go the fuck home. Like, stop exporting an American gospel to other people's cultures. I think it's just ugh.
I agree. That might be a longer topic.
It is. We don't need to get into it.
I used to work for a quote unquote missions organization, but they actually were doing missions in a way that like I still believe in, and I think is
if you're digging wells and building buildings and investing in communities, and you're not doing like, maybe, I don't know, this is where you have
I think that's another topic. That's a longer topic.
Yeah.
But I think there are some great organizations doing stuff.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on then.
Stay out of there.
I'll keep going in that
direction.
Collect
your money and funnel it to a warlord so he can pay his child soldiers.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me give you your marching orders here real quick. Hold a mock underground church meeting in a home or at your church. Give each participant a password or secret knock that they will need in order to enter your meeting.
Christian speakeasy.
Yeah.
Exactly. You could even hold your meeting outside in the woods. Then have people who are dressed as police invade your meeting. Have only 1 or 2 Bibles to share in the group. Use only the light from a lantern or candle.
Can we play this game when we do our first GUC meetup?
Dude, this is the airplane game that I've talked about at that weird camp I went to. Pretend that terrorists are taking over the plane and give the most unstable kids in the camp fake weapons and let them kick and punch people.
You must have read that word
Lose
for word.
Total control, because everyone that's a leader at this camp is like a hobbled old prick.
Find that awkward homeschooled pseudo military kid and just give him the role of a lifetime.
Give him a reason.
Hey,
Herschel, make it real.
I mean, to be honest, this sounds a lot like some games we played at a youth camp, like my youth group used to put on, like when they were still fun and cool. Like a lot of the games they played in the middle of the night and stuff, which I feel like that could be again a whole nother topic about like actual fun youth camp stuff. But they did some like really sketchy things. Looking back at it now, I'm like, oh man, there's a reason why you shouldn't do this with children. But it was a whole lot of fun when I was a teenager.
Oh man, Bianca talking about being abducted in the middle of the night.
That's what I was just thinking about.
Yeah, if you haven't listened to our episode, it's been a while back. It's in the 40s, I think, with Bianca, but she talks about being
the 1940s,
being fake abducted in the middle of the night, without knowing that it's a game.
She had no idea. It was like, we're all here, and then people bust in and fake abduct you.
Oh, see, we told kids it was a game, but then we hauled them out in the middle of the night and straight up hazed them. Like stuff that would 100% get people in serious trouble if it was happening at a university.
Yeah, and should. It's a crime. Like you were participating in a crime.
It's literally a crime.
I hope the statute of limitations are up, Jeremiah, because you just fucked yourself.
Well, to be fair, I was still I was on the cusp. I was like the teenager that's almost youth staff. So like sometimes you're volunteering, sometimes you're a kid. For all of the maybe crimes, I'm on the
Intro
kid
to
side.
child labor. That's what...
I'm good. I'm good. Well, of
How
course I was a child
convenient
laborer. I
for
was
you.
homeschooled. At least that's the way I'm going to tell this story.
Yeah.
So you could share the gospel. The last one is fun. It says you can dramatize. Create a short skit or a series of skits to be performed before your
Set to a
church
secular
congregation.
song that seems like it could have Christian lyrics, like Life Houses.
Hanging by a moment.
No, the You're Everything, that song.
Oh,
You're all I want. You're all I need.
that
You're
is
everything.
that Matchbox? Is that
No,
Matchbox?
that's Lifehouse.
You're everything I want, everything I need. No.
Yep, you're everything. You're everything. Yeah, that's Lifehouse.
I can't place that one.
It was in season 1 of Smallville. I realized that's probably not going to help you.
Oh, that did the trick.
It was
Vertical Horizon. I'm thinking of the Vertical Horizon song, Everything You Want.
Oh yeah, we're probably thinking of different songs. It was turned into a very popular Christian sketch for a while, where it was like one of those things you act out on stage during like youth events, where people are, being dragged between sin and holiness and whatever else. It was one of those. I can send you a link. They were honestly pretty well done. It's a good song.
Everything by Life. Find me here and speak to me. I want to feel you. I need to hear you. You are the light.
Yeah, one of those songs is like, is it a Christian song? Not sure, but did we certainly play it on the youth band? Yes, we did.
We love that.
Bro,
Anything. It's like, if it could
that's
be about
the gray
a girl
area you
God,
want to exist in.
If it gets you horny for God, it's the perfect song.
Anyone who's interested in that should go look up Alex Melton on YouTube, who has a series on that. It's pretty good.
So it says you can, basically create skits from the stories in the book or martyrs you've researched yourself. Select martyrs from both the past and the present. Put on your plays and then invite people to join prayer groups or pray weekly as described above. And then it says you can write, and it tells you like quite a few different things that you can write to your elected officials. Inform them of specific human rights violations committed against Christians in various countries around the world. To the ambassador of that country, to the officials of foreign governments. So, you could write to like Kim Jong-un and be like, you be nice. And then to the editor of your local newspaper. Educate your community on the horrors faced by Christians worldwide. Yeah, so literally like, write in and talk about how they're forcing you to make a wedding cake or...
Just slacktivism
whatever.
at its finest.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, that was pre-social media. So I'm sure a lot of that would be revised to like copy and paste this tweet.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if the guy that writes into your local paper like got his marching orders from Jesus Freaks?
Oh,
dude, we haven't heard from him in a while.
We haven't reviewed. It's been a while since I've looked it up. I'll check it out because Aaron, my friend Aaron, who was on we had him on an intro. We had him on the podcast for an intro, I think. Or was it a full episode? I think it was a full episode. He created under a pseudonym, and started responding to everything he would write in the paper. And his shit was so fucking funny. It was just, I love that small town bullshit for fun. Like, oh my God. He would send me his responses before they would get published sometimes. Like, how's this sound? And you're like, God, they were perfect. They were just perfect responses to like an alt-right person who thinks they're like, who thinks they're like an intellectual. And I loved it. Just to watch the back and forth between them. It was like watching like a really shitty boomer Facebook argument, but it was in your local paper.
Analog bickering.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Well, yeah. So I hope everybody has a better understanding of the martyrs and the real tangible dangers that we face in this country as we see our rights withered away by the likes of the Marxist left.
Yeah. Live in the moment, hanging by a moment, do it all.
Yeah. So, write your local official. Or, you know what? Screw that. write directly to Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Or
And,
Well, I would say if you want
AOC.
to test out the persecution in your local government, just to see where you're at on like the World Persecution Index, which is a real thing, don't look it up. Go to maybe your next school board meeting and get up in the middle and start to evangelize and see, are they good conservative Christians, or do you maybe undergo some persecution / consequences for doing that?
yeah, stand up and be heard. Sing loudly without, asking permission. Don't ask permission to share the gospel. Just stand up and scream. Are you going to hide that light under a bushel, or are you going to be tased?
I would honestly stand up, start praying, scream, should have bought a Honda, go off, do your thing.
Well, any closing thoughts or?
I just looked up Jason Wade on Instagram. That's a closing thought. Singer for Lifehouse. Definitely gonna see what we could. That'd be fun. Now that I know Jeremiah has such an affinity for pseudo Christian music.
I mean, I learned a lot of those to play on youth band. I don't know what to tell you. You can make a lot of things work. It song's pretty good. I'm not gonna lie.
He has less followers than I would have thought. Only 33.8 thousand.
Well, like, what's Lifehouse doing these days? I mean,
I bet Lifehouse has a lot. Let's look that up. These are good closing thoughts.
Fun fact for the audience: Jeremiah actually has a Counting Crows tattoo.
Oh, Lifehouse. I would have expected. I guess Lifehouse is pre-Instagram. I bet this is the test. We've talked about this, Casey. I bet they have like a fucking shitload of Facebook followers, and then just low on the Instagram follows
or MySpace.
Absolutely.
I bet their MySpace was
because they got 128.
It was going hard.
It's 128,000 IG followers.
That's actually pretty good for a band that like is not really in the public consciousness that much
I
anymore.
bet they
but
put out an album
back in the
6
day.
months ago, and we don't know about it.
That's probably true. I'm looking them up right now.
I feel like that happens with bands like this. Lifehouse.
I feel like Casey's been trying to steer this
Dude,
thing, and we're just not
This is
cooperating.
it. This is how we know the generation of band came out in, because it holds true, Casey. 3.2 million followers on Facebook.
Okay, their last album was in 2015.
Okay, well, I guess that, yeah. I mean, it's the Facebook generation. That is so funny to me, man.
They put out a greatest hits in 2017, though.
Good for them.
Like a whole CD of greatest hits?
I think so, yeah.
It's like, who puts out an EP of greatest hits?
Oh, actually,
4 songs.
Oh man, the greatest hits EP. That's an amazing idea that somebody needs to take. All right, what band would be really ready for like a greatest hits EP?
Static X.
That's a greatest hits single.
You know what? Yeah, I will buy the 45 with Push It.
It looks like Jason Wade, singer-songwriter, was raised by missionary parents.
Okay,
dude, we're on to something.
Yeah,
that was a great suggestion, Jeremiah.
Yeah. All right.
All right, everybody. If you like the show, send it to a friend and rate us wherever you listen to it. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I don't know, wherever.
There's nowhere else. That's it.
Pandora. You and
Leave
your
a
dad
review.
listen to it on Pandora.
Rate and review. Reviewing helps a lot. I heard
Yes.
about it. Algorithms and shit. Apparently, it makes a big difference when people write stuff about you. I think 3-star reviews with you writing basically counts as a 5-star. So we'll just accept more of those.
Yeah, if we don't have a certain number of views or reviews by, like, I don't know, let's say March 21st, Sam and I are going to take up heavy smoking.
Yeah.
As a form of like self-flagellation.
We'll post nudes. That's what we'll do. And see if our account gets shut down.
We kind of make like a yin-yang formation of us like blowing each other.
Maybe it's time to finally give Elon that $12 a month.
That blue check mark.
And you can join in on the conversation, get a hold of us by joining our Discord. It's a fun place full of cool people, and you should jump in there. We talk about all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of funny things packed in there. It's a cool place. So you'll find the link on our social media, and yeah, Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.